Hi everyone, this is a video for new staff or a refresher for current staff. The video will specifically discuss sound walls, heart words, and how we structure our phonics and spelling lessons in P2. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Yugambeh peoples as the traditional custodians of the land on which we go to school and live on. I'd like to pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to thank all Australian Indigenous peoples for sharing their land. We promise to look after it, the animals and the people too. Okay, today we will be looking at the phonological route. Of course, we'll be discussing how we go from Vision Villages through Sound City to Meaning Mountain. If you haven't yet watched the video on the science of reading, you can find that in our Early Years Literacy OneNote. I would suggest you watch that first so that you understand the science of reading and the reading brain. This is our phonics scope and sequence from prep to 2. It outlines when each of the sounds are introduced. This is a really important document that you'll need to become familiar with so that you're following the correct scope and sequence. We are going to discuss sound walls first. At Regents Park State School, we believe that our sound walls are a key component in our phonics and spelling program. We think that they are important because it's based on the premise that we learn to speak well before we learn to read, of course. So what we're doing is we are following that natural progression in language development, and we're teaching children to map speech to print, rather than the other way around. These are our two sound walls. We have the vowel valley and the consonant wall. We've been on a journey with sound walls over the last year or so these are still a work in progress. There may still be edits. If there are edits or things that we feel that need to be added or changed, you will find these on the Early Years Literacy OneNote, and we will let you know if there are any updates. I'm now going to talk a little bit more about each of the walls and explain them a little bit more in depth. So I'd like to discuss the vowel valley first of all, but before I discuss how the vowel valley specifically is set out, I'd like to just talk about some of the components in both of the sound walls. So you can see here we have mouth articulation cards, and we think that it is important that this is a photograph of a real child's mouth. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to see how the mouth is formed, where the tongue is, where the teeth are, that sort of thing. The other important component that to our sound walls that you may not have seen before is the use of embedded mnemonics. So this is where the picture that goes with the sound is embedded within the letter. So research shows us that when you have an embedded mnemonic like this, it reduces the amount of repetitions a child needs to remember the sound that is associated with that grapheme. So we have used embedded mnemonics to help assist our children in remembering the sounds. So that's something that's also important. So I want to talk a little bit about the vowel valley and the way it's set up. And as you can see here, the reason it's in a V is because it is mimicking the motion of the chin. So we start up here with our chin nice and high in the high position when we're making the E sound. And then as we're making the R sound, our chin is at its lowest point. And then finally, highest point up here where we're making our oo or our U sound. Then as we move across the valley, the sounds are moving from the front to the back of the mouth. This is our resting mouth, and we call this our schwa, and this is where our mouth is, how it would be when it is resting. And this resting mouth here is what we call the schwa sound, or sometimes people call it the lazy vowel sound. Down here is where we have our R-controlled vowels, and we actually do have two other R-controlled vowels that we've decided to actually put into our valley. So obviously AR and OR are R-controlled vowels, and they could very well be placed down here with the other ones here. However, we've decided to put them inside the vowel valley at Regents Park. And these are our diphthongs. So a diphthong is a single syllable vowel sound where the beginning of the sound is different from the end. And you can see there with the transitional mouth articulation cards that our mouth changes as we say the sound, but it is still just a single syllable sound. Now, the only one that causes a little bit of controversy is the ear sound. A lot of people believe that it is not a diphthong, and that it is actually two sounds, and other people believe that it is a diphthong. We made the decision based on our scope and sequence that we would include it as a diphthong. And our consonant wall. So we have arranged our consonant wall with headings. This is to help the children navigate the wall a little bit more easily. And you can see there that in brackets next to each of the headings that we have given it, there is the technical term. We don't need you to use those technical terms. That's just for your information. But we thought it was important that we still had them on there. All right, so when you're setting up your sound wall in your classroom, it's really important that you are building the sound wall gradually with your class. As you follow our systematic synthetic phonics program. So please do not just have the whole sound walls set up ready to go on that first day, because they will become very overwhelming and the children are not going to engage with them if you don't build it with them slowly. So a suggestion on how to do this with ease is to make sure that you actually have it set up, but you can have the cards flipped over so that they can't see the cards. And then as you introduce that sound, you flip it up around so that they can see the mouth articulation card and they can see the grapheme card. If you have a grapheme card, for example, the graphemes here, but you aren't introducing all of these graphemes, then you can use the locks that are in your resource pack to cover up those graphemes that you haven't yet explicitly taught. And some of these graphemes may not even be taught until the following year or even 2 years after, depending on what grade you're teaching. The other thing that's really important when you're setting up your sound wall is that you really need to explicitly teach the mouth articulation to your class as you turn it around. We're not trying to create little speech pathologists, so we're not suggesting that you spend a long period of time on this, but it is really important that they are articulating the sounds correctly, that they understand how their mouth looks and how their mouth feels, where their tongue is, that sort of thing. The other thing we've included in the sound wall resources to help with articulation is our voiced and our unvoiced buttons here. These are for use on the consonant wall only. Simply because all vowels are voiced, so there's no need for you to add the buttons to that wall. But I'll talk a little bit more about which are voiced and which are unvoiced in a moment, but adding those buttons when you introduce the sounds can also really help with making sure the children are pronouncing it and articulating it correctly. The other thing that you can add is an anchor word. So in your resource pack, you have got anchor words that you can use. If you'd like to create a different anchor word with your class, you can do that. Or if you don't feel as though the anchor words are useful to you, you don't need to add them, but they are an option. And finally, the other really important thing that you'll receive in your resource pack for making sure sound walls are used well in your classroom is a student card. So this is where you print off, and I would suggest in A4 so that they're large enough for the children to read easily. You print off both the vowel valley and the consonant walls in A4, you put them back to back and you laminate them, and you have those cards accessible to the children all the time. Those cards show all of the graphemes, whether you've unlocked them or not, and that is for them to be able to access during writing lessons. So when they're writing, they need access to all of the graphemes. It also allows for that differentiation. There might be some children in your class who, even though you haven't explicitly taught the grapheme for a particular phoneme yet, they still need access to it because perhaps they're ready for those sounds. So I'd like to quickly talk about how you know if a letter sound is voiced or unvoiced. It's really simple, and you can teach your children in this similar way. So a voiced letter sound is when you put 2 fingers on your vocal cords, just on your throat, and when you say the letter sound, you can feel a vibration in your vocal cords. So this is B, D, G, J, L, M, N, V, W, E, Z, Sh, Qu, V. And as I mentioned before, we've got the vowels, which are all voiced sounds. So there's no need for you to use the voice buttons on the vowel valley. And then unvoiced is simply the opposite. So when we place our 2 fingers on our vocal cords and we say the sound, we shouldn't feel any vibration. If we do feel the vibration, it means that we're not saying it correctly. So that is It's often that we find some of these unvoiced sounds get turned into voiced sounds. For example, when you say, or the students say p or t or k, and they're adding that that schwa sound at the end. And if they're doing that, that can pose a problem later on when they're trying to segment a word, perhaps for writing or spelling, and they're hearing p, and they're not hearing that p. That can become difficult. I think that this often happens, and teachers sometimes fall into the trap of doing it, and definitely I have as well, when you're trying to increase the volume of the sound for the students. You tend to add the schwa at the end because we're trying to make it louder so everybody can hear in the classroom. So instead of just making the quiet p sound, we're going p, so everyone can hear. All right, so I'm going to move now on to heart words. I'm going to discuss what they are and then briefly talk about how we use these in the classroom at Regents Park. So I'm going to talk about sight words. So sight words is a term that people have used for quite a long time. And basically, a sight word is any word that you have orthographically mapped in your brain, meaning any word that you're able to retrieve without actually working it out. So you can look at a word and know what it is straight away. Obviously, we want almost all words to become sight words. We want to be able to use that lexical route to retrieve our words instantly and not have to break them up and blend the sounds together and work out what it is. But there are 2 types of sight words at Regents Park State School that we want to explicitly teach to our students. We've divided them into 2 categories: high frequency words and heart words. So high frequency words are the most common words in the English written language, but they are decodable. So you can break them up and the student should know all of the sounds and be able to blend them back together. These are the sorts of words that are going to be the easiest for students to orthographically map. And if you're not sure what that term means, I've got a little definition there for you. And then we also have heart words at Regents Park. Some places call them tricky words, but they mean the same thing. So heart words are also the most common in the English written language, but they have got an irregular spelling pattern, or the phoneme, there are phonemes in it that we have not yet taught or that they have not yet learnt. So in a heart word, when we break it up and we teach the parts of the word, we don't have to teach it as a whole, and we absolutely want to move away from sight words and teaching them as a whole, or for the child to use their vision villages and try and remember it like a picture. What we want to do is break it up into its sounds, show them the parts that are easy. We already know these. Those are easy. We know that S says, we know that D says D. But the tricky part, or the part we need to learn off by heart, is the E in the middle, because AI doesn't usually make that E sound. So that's the part we need to learn. By breaking up the words explicitly like this, we're showing them that they don't have to remember it as a whole, but rather to still learn the word in parts and just have a look at the bit that's difficult and learn that part off by heart. The thing with heart words as well, as I mentioned before, they can include spelling patterns we haven't yet taught, which means that once you have taught those spelling patterns, those heart words can actually then become high frequency words. As a year 2 teacher, you might be looking at all of the heart words and think, well, hang on a second, that's not a heart word, that's not tricky, my students should know that. And absolutely, some of those would not be heart words for your students. Some of those would be expected to be high frequency words because you've explicitly taught all of the parts of the word, therefore they should be able to decode it. There are, of course, ones that have irregular spelling patterns that will never fit into normal patterns, and of course those are those true heart words. Here is our heart words. We have grouped them based on colour to make it a little bit easier, and there is some repetition here. So we have repeated as and was in some of them, and that's because we teach them when we're teaching that S says Z and when A says O. So they are repeated. You don't necessarily have to have them both up. Now, we would not expect for you to have all of these up, and it really depends on what year level you are teaching. So in prep, you will probably have none of these up at the beginning of the year. In year 1, you may only have the ones that have been taught in prep, and in year 2, you may only have the ones that have been taught in year 1. You can also choose to have 0 up at the start of the year, and that you slowly build these up over the course of the year. There are as you can see, there are only 94 of them, so you can definitely cover them. As with the sound wall, this is something that can grow and can change, so please provide your feedback. I think there's already 2 that we really would like to add in here that aren't here, and we may find some others along our journey. So here is an example of our heart word booklet. This is list 1. This booklet has 2 purposes. First of all, you can choose to send it home in prep sheet by sheet, in year 1, book 1 and book 2, in year 2, perhaps even both books. You can send them home as homework, but they also serve a purpose for the teachers so that they can see exactly how the words are broken up and which parts are difficult. You can see here we've got some from list 6, and you can see that the digraphs E are on this page, and you can see that they're represented with a line, and the single letter sounds are represented with a dot. And this is how we would expect for you to teach them to the class as well. The little sounds box helps you and helps the parents to explain to the children which parts are tricky and what sounds are being made with which letters. And here's list 20. You can see that it obviously becomes a little bit more complex and the words become more difficult. I'm now going to discuss our phonics and spelling lessons and how we structure these in the lower school. You are more than welcome to ask for assistance with this. There are teachers who can model it for you. This may be very new to you. And you, of course, can add some of your own flair to it as well, but this is sort of the bare minimum of what we would expect in a lesson. So your phonics and spelling lessons should begin with a daily review, and this is a review of previously taught sounds. So obviously not just the sounds from that week, but from previous weeks as well. These are designed to be fast-paced and shouldn't really take up a large chunk of your lesson. So you can use a variety of resources. Some examples are our embedded mnemonic flashcards, and you can jump onto our Literacy OneNote and print those off if you would like to use those. You can also use our Regents Park State School Phonics video. So this video was created in 2022. It involves students from the school performing a chant, an action, and the sound for each of the single phonemes. They're great for review in prep, but any classroom in any grade can use them. There's also a PowerPoint version of this so that you can skip straight to the sounds that you need as well. And finally, of course, we have our Decodable Readers Australia online library. And on there, they have great lessons that not only review the letters and sounds, but also review the blending, segmenting and blending of those sounds as well. So now I'll talk you through the enhancing phase of our phonics and spelling lessons. This is a quick little weekly overview slide, mainly for the teacher. It just outlines what you do on what days, and there's a quick little skip button at the bottom there for you. So on a Monday, you do a whole class new grapheme introduction. So every Monday, you introduce a new grapheme to the class. Then you would go over and do that new grapheme in a number of activities with the class. And then you would do the whole class high frequency words and heart words introduction for the week. On a Tuesday and a Friday, you start with whole class Heggerty, so your phonological awareness, and then you would do a review of your grapheme for the week and your high frequency words and your heart words for that week. You then break off into small groups or individual work depending on what the day is, and you do those activities. And on one of the days, Tuesday to Friday, you need to do a morphology lesson, and we'll talk about that. Monday. Here's where we introduce the grapheme to the students. So you need to, as we've discussed, explicitly show them the mouth articulation card. You would explicitly discuss the embedded mnemonics. And you can see here that we've covered up the one that we're not doing yet. We've got an anchor word here, and the other really important thing that you need to do is explicitly show them how those letters are formed. This is a great slide for them to be able to form those letters, say those sounds. Remember that when they are when they're actually forming the letters and making the sounds at the same time, that actually reduces the amount of repetitions and really moves the graphemes into that long-term memory. You would show them where, with this grapheme particularly, where on the sound wall, the vowel valley, it's located. That's really important, so that not only do they know where on the wall they can go, but also on their student card where they can find this grapheme. So I'm now going to just quickly go over some of the activities that you would do as a whole class. I'm not actually going to model these activities because there's a separate video that runs through them and models each of them to you, but I just want to quickly run you through. The important thing you need to know is that you do not need to do all of these. You choose one or two, and you choose an activity that's going to suit your class and your class's needs. Another important thing to remember is, even though this is whole class, this is a great opportunity to use those mini whiteboards in your classroom so that every child is practicing it and that you can monitor how they're going. So there's word building. And this is where you would get your words from either an old sound waves activity or from our shared understanding scope and sequence. And if there's any rules, it's really important that you explicitly state the rules here. If there is a rule that we feel you need to explicitly teach to your students, it will be in the scope and sequence, and you will find it there. This activity is a sound swap. This is where you are brainstorming words that have your grapheme for the week and then manipulating those words by deleting, adding, substituting. Here is where you look at the letters in the words, how many sounds are in the words. You actually say what's the third letter, or maybe what's the third sound, and you really start to pull apart and analyze a whole range of words that have got the or sound in them. This is the mini whiteboard practice. This is a great opportunity for you to use some word level dictation. So this might be where you say a word that has the or sound in it. The students have to write it and then show you. Or you might even start to, if you're in year 2, start to build up to a couple of words that they have to write just from listening to. And then finally we come to our high frequency words and our heart words for the week. So there are some high frequency words down the left there that should be decodable, meaning we should have already taught these parts of the words by this stage. This is a grade 1 PowerPoint, so you can see they all include the or sound, but they also include other parts that we have already taught. And then over in the heart, we've got heart words that include the or sound but are irregular patterns and ones we haven't taught in year 1 yet. So what we often do is, even though we teach these and these might already be up on the wall or previously we've put them up and discussed them, we start to, as the year goes on, map these words then to our sound wall, our vowel valley. And we take, for example, the for sound, and we take it and we go and put it on the vowel valley, so that when they're looking for a heart word, they're not scouring 94 hearts on a wall. Instead, they're going, oh, I know where the or sound is. Oh, look, and here's all the heart words that make the or sound. They will have a much better chance of finding their heart words if they're mapped to the sound wall. So this brings us to our Tuesday to Friday lessons, and these look a little bit different as I discussed at the start. So we'll dive into these. You always start your Tuesday and Friday lessons with Hegedy, and you're really aiming for around 10 minutes. Please don't think that you need to do every single activity or every single word, because if you do, sometimes it will take you 25 minutes. Please choose what is appropriate for your class and the skills that they need most. We review the mouth articulation, the graphemes, and of course the handwriting. We review where to find it on the vowel valley. We review the high frequency words and the heart words. And then we break up into small group or individual work. So this is simply an example of the sorts of activities that you would do. There are a couple that are non-negotiables that definitely need to be included somewhere in your week. So the non-negotiables are your morphology. You must complete some sort of morphology lesson, and we have a scope and sequence for that. So if you simply go to term 4, week 3, and have a look at what morphology you need to teach for that week, and create a lesson. It can be something as simple as a little worksheet. There's lots and lots of ideas, but you can see here for this particular week, the morphology lesson was on the suffix ing, and you could do ed and s, because we'd already done those in year 1, so they'd be a revision. The other non-negotiable is a dictation. I usually do this on a Friday, and I'd highly recommend a Friday only because you can use your dictation a little bit like we used to use a spelling test. So I'll talk a little bit more about exactly what a dictation is, but that's something you need to include in your week. Other things that you can of course use is our SOAR toolkits. We have got one for every year level. We may get more if you're finding them extremely useful, but using some activities out of there. One of the really great activities is the segmenting sounds sheet. You can do that sort of thing with the students. You can do them in small groups or whole class, anything like that. So I'll just talk a little bit more about dictation. Here's an example of the 2 dictation sentences for this particular week with the or sound. It also includes words that are that have spellings that the children should already know or that have already been covered. So how we run a dictation is simply you have a book. We have like a spelling book in our class. You say the sentence and they have to write it. you don't write it up for them. They can absolutely use the sound wall, and then you need to decide how many times you want to say it. Usually at the start of year one, I do it on an unlimited amount of times so that the students can hear it as many times as they like and have the best chance at success, because a dictation is difficult. And then as the year moves on, you might add more sentences or more complex sentences. You might also then start to say that you're not just looking for the grapheme for that week, but you're also looking for whether they're spelling the high frequency or heart words correctly. You might also say that you're actually looking for their punctuation, so their capital letters and their full stops this week. So there's lots of ways that you can increase the complexity of a dictation, and it is a wonderful formative assessment that you can do that is quick, and it really gives you some valuable information about where your students are at and what gaps you have, and how you can help them. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you very much. As I said at the beginning, if you require any modelling or assistance at all with any of this, you can of course contact Sue Cartner, who's our Head of Department Curriculum, or you're welcome to contact me, Sarah Wilson. I'm a Year 1 teacher and a coach part-time. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you so much.